tonight. My name is Scott Knickerbocker, and I'm a professor of English and Environmental Studies here at the College of Idaho. Before I introduce our special guest, Tim Palmer, I'd like to thank the following groups and individuals who made Tim's presentation possible this evening. First, the College of Idaho's National Endowment for the Humanities Funding Committee, the Student Senate and the Associated Students of the College of Idaho, the Student Club Terra, which is the Environmental Resource and Recreation Association, the Office of the President and President Marv and Mrs. Lori Henberg, the Sustainability Council, Bon Appetit Food Service, and especially the Idaho Humanities Council. This program is supported in part by a grant from the Idaho Humanities Council, a state-based program of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Now to our speaker, Tim Palmer, writer, photographer, river conservationist, and adventurer. After receiving a Bachelor of Science degree in Landscape Architecture from Pennsylvania State University, Tim worked for 8 years as a land use planner on land use and environmental topics from 1971 to 1980. He started to write full-time in 1980. Tim has been taking photos of America's rivers and natural landscapes for more than 30 years and may have the most complete collection of river photos with images from watersheds all across the United States. Tim is an award-winning author of 20 books about rivers, conservation, and adventure travel. His books include Rivers of California, Trees and Forests of America, Oregon, Preserving the Beauty and Spirit of Our Land, The Heart of America, Our Landscape, Our Future, The Snake River, Window to the West, and the book his presentation tonight is based upon, Rivers of America, about which author David James Duncan wrote, "From the apex of a life given to moving water, Tim Palmer has bequeathed a gift to the generations. In these images, 1 billion trees have gathered on America's shorelines, and the very mountains have parted to honor the rivers sliding by. Sit down in the quiet, throw open your blinds, and be grateful. Here are the shining prayer wheels that sculpt and prism our continent and give it and all of us life." You may purchase Tim's books in the lobby, where he will be happy to sign copies after his presentation. Throughout his career, Tim has devoted much of his photography and writing to the cause of river conservation. He is author of dozens of magazine articles and river studies, display packages, and brochures for conservation campaigns, including publications for the successful effort to designate the Kings River in the National Wild and Scenic Rivers System, and to protect the South Yuba River in the California State Scenic Rivers System. Most recently, he authored the Western Rivers Conservancy's Great Rivers of the West report, a survey of the natural qualities of rivers in 11 Western states. He's also served on the board of the National River Advocacy Group, American Rivers, and on the board of the National River Organizing Group, River Network. An inveterate river lover, Tim has canoed or rafted on more than 300 rivers in the United States and Western Canada. He lived for 22 years as a nomad in his van, traveling throughout the country to do research, writing, and photography for his book projects. Tim was named one of the nation's 10 greatest river conservationists and one of the 100 paddlers of the century by Paddler magazine. For his conservation and creative river work, Tim was the first recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from American Rivers in 1988. Tim is married to last night's wonderful speaker, Ann Velisis, author of Discovering the Unknown Landscape, A History of America's Wetlands, and Kitchen Literacy, How We Lost Knowledge of Where Food Comes From and Why We Need to Get It Back. And her books are also available in the lobby for purchase. They lived for 11 years together in their van and now live on the Oregon coast in a house. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Tim, for in a couple of weeks, he'll travel to Washington, D.C. to receive the Communicator of the Year Award from the National Wildlife Federation. Please join me in welcoming Tim Palmer.
Thank you, Scott. It's just great to be here. Ann and I are both thrilled to be in this place. And some of you met her last night, and you get a chance to meet her tonight again also. And I haven't really broken this news to our wonderful host, Rochelle Johnson, yet, but Ann and I talked about this before the event tonight, and we've decided to stay. So we like College of Idaho so much, we've decided to stay. No, seriously, it is great to be here and to do these programs with you. So thank you so much for the great welcome that you've given us and for everything. As I walked across campus today and on my way to Scott's class, and as I talked with his students and other students at a couple of different meals since we've been here, I couldn't help but reflecting back on my own experience as a college student. And one of the really dominant feelings I had in those days was that I really wanted to be passionate about something, but I didn't know what. I didn't really know what it would be, but I thought I had the ability to really work hard on something that would move me if only I could find what it was. And I was really fortunate in part because of a college professor who you'll see in my slideshow and many other circumstances. I was really fortunate to find rivers as a subject that just interested me and engaged me. And I ended up developing a whole career around that, which not very many people can do, but I was really a fortunate one to do that. Many people have done this through river conservation work, like Bill Sutterby, the head of Idaho Rivers United, who's here with us tonight. And I was able to take that from a planning and an activist career into writing and photography. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but being a writer and a photographer, you explain things and you show things both. And it ended up taking me to virtually everything else about life. Rivers are a metaphor for a good reason. They symbolize so much of life. And writing about them and taking pictures, it took me to so much else. And so I think I can say after 30 years of writing about people and places, rivers and the land and communities and everything, all the intersections of those things, one thing I've learned for sure is that each and every one of us has a fascinating story about the path that we have taken to be where we are. And I mean that not just as the physical path, but also as the path of our aspirations and our dreams. We've come from many different directions. We're all here tonight. I'm honored that you've gathered to hear me talk and show a few pictures. We've come from many different directions and with many different stories to tell. I'm here to show you pictures from my book, Rivers of America, and to tell you a little bit about what I learned in writing that. And I've told the story of rivers in many different ways. Tonight, I'd like to tell it to you as the story of the path that I have taken, that long route that brought me to be here with you tonight. And so maybe in telling you this very personal story, I'll be able to also explain a little bit of the importance of rivers in all our lives. And so let me, with that intro, let me roll the slides here. Seth, if you want to kill the lights, and Ann, you want to turn on the projector, I'd love to show you a few pictures. Okay, it all began here. I'm not going to bore you with a family slideshow, don't worry about that. The point of this slide is that Rivers and I go way back. That's me on the left, my proud grandfather on the right, and a couple of carp that we caught in the Ohio River near where I grew up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And my mother was willing to take the picture, but she was not willing to cook the fish. My grandfather did, but Mom didn't trust them. And she was probably right. This sign was not posted back then, but I'm sure it should have been. The Ohio River Valley at that time was polluted from one end to another. Pittsburgh was the steel-making capital of the world. No one expected rivers where I grew up to be clean. It was a given that they were polluted. You can make steel without polluting the water, just like you can farm and do almost anything without polluting the water. But back then, nobody expected that. Pollution was the norm. And I was part of the problem. I worked in this big steel mill along the Ohio River my first summer out of high school. And one of my jobs was to clean out the drain fluid of these enormous metal grinding And I did that by dipping a bucket into the waste pan underneath the grinder, scooping up a bucket full of this brown, oily sludge that was full of metal filings. And then I did what my foreman told me to do. I carried that bucket of water across the floor of the plant and I dumped it out the back window. That's how we dealt with toxic hazardous waste before the Federal Clean Water Act of 1972. Every day I drove across this bridge on my way to work and I'd get caught in traffic up there and I'd look down at the Ohio River and I'd try to imagine that great river, which is now just one back-to-back series of dams for 930 miles, full of those colorful swirls of oily water. And I'd try to imagine what that Ohio River would have looked like as a natural river. Try to imagine what it looked like before people had been there, doing everything that we've done to it. Back when it had riffles and current and sandbars and gravel bars and deer coming down to drink and ducks flying away, I'm not sure why I tortured myself in this way, except that this river was also a river of my youth. This is the Youghiogheny River of southwestern Pennsylvania, one of the most floated whitewater streams in America today. It just so happened that my ancestors moved to the Youghiogheny River in 1737. I still had relatives there, so my family would go there to visit in the summer, and I would stay for a week or two. And I got to run as just this little wild boy in the Appalachian Mountains here along this glorious river. And I'd scramble down the rocks from the sides of the rapids like this one. I'd imagine building a raft out of logs and kicking it off from shore and waving goodbye to everything I had known in order to seek out the unknown and learn what I needed to know about the world. And I still remember one night along a rapid just like this one. It was a sultry summer night there in the Appalachians with the rhododendrons scenting the air. I sat there on a big slab of sandstone and leaned back on another one and just listened to that river flow, and the sound of that rapid filled up my head and just kind of mesmerized me. And the rest of the world disappeared. It could have been 1,000 miles away. Not a conscious thought on my mind. I was about 10 or 12 years old, understand, when this happened. The rest of the world disappeared. And then it suddenly occurred to me that this place was perfect. And I knew why it was perfect, because I had seen the Ohio River also. I knew it was perfect for the simple reason that it had been left alone. It was natural. So somehow there, at that early age, the magic of flowing water had been poured into my soul. And I just wanted more. I didn't know how I was going to get it, but I wanted more. I went away to college. Can you focus that again? Went away to college then at Penn State. This was 1970. I did a plan for a bicycle trail system for the whole State College, Pennsylvania region, and at the end of the year I presented it to a group of townspeople, and when I was all done, out of the back of the room walked this man in the back of the canoe, Dr. Peter Fletcher of the Forestry Department. He said, "Tim, how would you like to work next year, my senior year, on a watershed-based planning program, ecology-based watershed protection planning program for a river being studied for the National Wild and Scenic River System?" And I just jumped at the opportunity. Pine Creek in northern Pennsylvania became the other river of my dreams. I'd go there to do research. I never wanted to go back home to school. It had its problems, though. It was a great place, but it had its problems. Dumping trash here was one of them. Pete was trying to clean up the water along that river, and he wanted me to do a plan for how to protect the land along the water, especially the waterfront. I was a landscape architecture student, so I knew where to begin. I collected information, put them on big maps. The map was really about the size of the screen up there. This one shows wildlands that we wanted to protect for their obvious habitat values. I mapped a lot of things like that. This was the original GIS project before computers. We did it all by hand. So then, there as a student, I kind of had a good idea where to start. I ended up with a pretty good grasp of the land and the water and the issues at stake. I was absolutely clueless, however, about some of the social and political difficulties lurking in my path. And I went to work on the river then after school for a group called Trout Unlimited, trying to put my plan together. Not a clue about some of these things. For example, I had a tough time convincing these two guys. It's actually three guys, if you look closely. Do you see the third man on the tailgate of the truck there? I had a tough time convincing these guys of the importance of the Nature Conservancy buying up open space so it wouldn't be developed. But there at an early point in my career, I learned the importance of telling stories about rivers so that people understand the importance of them. And I learned the importance of showing the beauty of rivers so that people see the value of them. When I did that work for Trout Unlimited, we accomplished some great things. We protected this whole opposite side of Pine Creek as a natural area, the state equivalent of a wilderness area. You can still go to those great groves of northern hardwoods that are protected now, just like they were then. I lived along this stream in a cabin without electricity or plumbing. I didn't want either. I took a bucket out of the stream and drank it without treatment. I loved living there, but best of all, I learned how to canoe. So here I am with a smile on my face, my dog in the front of the boat. And here I am a little bit later that year on the cover of Canoe magazine. I may look reasonably competent here, but don't let me fool you. This was another typical scene of the day. Can you all see the canoe in this picture? Let me just point it out. This is the canoe right here. This is what we boaters call a rack. I hit a rock, a badly undercut rock, leaned the wrong way, the boat filled with water. It sank. The more I tried to get it up, the deeper it went. I got out, I got my dog out, but not by a really wide margin. When I say I'm glad to be here tonight, I really mean it. I got my brother eventually, and we pulled it off with a block of tackle. Here it is. A few scratches, hey, no big problem. I spliced the gunnels in about 8 places. I used it for another 12 years. Until I happened to be guiding a trip for the National Group American Rivers on the Potomac River, and I was there having lunch with one of the board members that day, who happened to be the owner of Mad River Canoe Company. And Kay was looking at my boat, I could tell, as we were eating our sandwiches there, and eventually, as I took a bite and stopped talking, she said, "Tim, I want you to take a big discount on a new canoe." I said, "Kay, I don't need a new boat, and besides, this just shows that Mad River Canoes, if you just give them a little bit of love and care, they'll last forever." And she just shook her head and said, "Tim, you know nothing about marketing." Which was true then and now. I went to work then for the county planning agency and learned at a much deeper level how everything we do to watersheds, all of this land, affects the rivers and the water itself. For example, we had strip mining for coal. And here's what it did to the water. This is the West Branch of the Susquehanna, completely sterilized. Not just no fish, but no invertebrates, no insects, no nothing. Sterilized by acid mine drainage. That's still going on today with mountaintop removal in West Virginia and the Appalachian Mountains. I managed to get all new mine permits disapproved in our county. The miners tried to get me fired from my job. I learned the importance of flooding. Here's the little village where I live. Normal summer flow. Notice the houses on the other side. Here it is at the height of the Hurricane Agnes flood in 1972. Biggest flood on record. I saw there firsthand the tremendous cost, public and private, that comes when we allow development on the floodplain. And I also learned that the floodplain just happens to be the most important of all habitat for wildlife. So if you're going to do one thing to protect a river, protect the floodplain from development. I managed to launch a program in our county to zone the floodplain. And so in 3 years, we got 52 local municipalities to enact zoning that kept development off of really lowland areas like this. I worked with streams and little pieces of the whole, but became curious about the big picture. And so the next year, with my best friend Bob Banks, I launched a canoe trip as far as we could float in the Susquehanna River, and we paddled the whole way to the Chesapeake Bay, 280 miles. Here's Bob as we're going through some rapids right at the city of Harrisburg, Appalachian Mountains there in the background. And here we are in a back channel, there in the, just that world of green, and it was just so remarkable being out there day after day after day, becoming a part of those Susquehanna rhythms, wonderful rhythms of the river. The morning sunrise followed by the afternoon sunset, the calm in the morning followed by the windy afternoons, the pull and riffle sequence over and over and over again, and every night out there sleeping under that great dome of sycamore limbs and stars. There was just absolutely nothing else in the world like it. Many of you know that feeling of being on a river, just living there for a while. And seeing the whole length of a great river, we became even more aware of all the complexities involved, and even more aware how everything you do affects the stream, whether it's a highway encroachment here or a strip line there, it all affects the health of that stream. And even I hear that there were dams on the lower river. This was really the ultimate case. There were 6 dams, and we had to portage around hydroelectric dams. We got to see how they blocked the passage of fish that still go up some of our rivers without dams. Here we're being lifted by a power company in the bed of a dump truck and hauled around to a safe place to put in. We saw how those dams stopped the migration of the blueback herring, the shad, these amazing fish that once migrated up from the ocean. They couldn't do it anymore the way this Chinook salmon can still do on the Rogue River of Southern Oregon, the way they still do, but only by a narrow margin on our own Snake River of Idaho. I'll talk more about that in a minute. At the end of that trip, we came away with just a much better understanding of what a river really is and what it should be. This was the mid-70s. It was still the age of big dam construction. Hundreds of big dams still being built and planned all over our country. I managed to talk my boss at the County Planning Commission into giving me a year off without pay to go photograph these sites that were being dammed, where the dams were under construction, valleys and canyons that would never be seen again because they were about to be flooded forever, under reservoirs, most of them not needed. And here are just a couple of those pictures that I took on that year-long tour. This is the Jackson River in Virginia, flooded later that year by Gathright Dam. Here's the Applegate River in Oregon, flooded later by a dam. Here's the Stanislaus in California, one of the most beautiful rivers of the Sierra Nevada foothills, the most popular whitewater in the West at the time. Are you focusing there, Annie? This amazing stream that flowed out of the high country and down through the foothills, a place that brought people joy in a way that no other place on earth could ever possibly do. But downstream, New Melones Dam was built 700 feet high, one of the tallest dams in America, not needed, but built for flood control when cheaper alternatives were available. Friends of the River launched a campaign to try to stop the dam. They lost in a statewide vote only because the contractors building the dam paid for a massive misinformation campaign. The group went on to try to keep that dam from being completely filled, which would have spared the upper 9 miles, which were the most amazing part of the canyon. I ended up joining them in that effort, retiring from my planning job, moving to California to write a book about their efforts and to work with them. Ultimately, however, even though we did everything that we could, we failed in that effort to try to save that amazing place. And we had to watch these flood waters rise, foot by agonizing foot, covering everything we had known of that miraculous place. Here, this scene today, 600 feet deep under the muddy, dark, flat water reservoir that did not have to be built. So, trying to fight off despair, many of us resolved that never again would a place as precious as this be lost. And I soon had the opportunity to put that resolve to work. Here along the Kings River, just to the south of there, where another dam, 500 feet high, proposed for irrigation but not needed. Another dam was proposed. The Committee to Save the Kings River, a bunch of trout fishermen organized. They hired me as the writer for the campaign. Here, this river begins at 11,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada, flows down through the deepest canyon in North America. It's also the finest large river trout fishery in California, a place of tremendous value. This is where the dam site was that would flood all of that area. Within 1 year, we went from a seriously threatened river to a river protected in the National Wild and Scenic River System, so that all of us can go there today and see that amazing place just the way it always was. I realized then that it wasn't just the Pine Creek and the Susquehanna and the Kings and Stanislaus that were threatened, beautiful but threatened, but rivers all over our country. And I began to take pictures more seriously, thinking I'd love to show all of this to other people. I especially began to photograph on the long river trips that I was doing, like the salmon here. The Salmon River of Idaho is one of the 2 longest trips you can do in the West, 400 miles, essentially dam-free, from the headwaters of the river here in Sawtooth Valley, down past 7 major sub-ranges of the Rocky Mountains. Here we are in the Sawtooth, where the river is still beginning. You paddle or row 150 miles directly toward the Continental Divide, and then around Salmon, Idaho, you turn away again, and you cross that incredible mountainous wilderness backbone of our state of Idaho, here through rapid after rapid, canyon after canyon, until you finally emerge in the flat water below, near Lewiston, Idaho, the flat water of Lower Granite Dam, the uppermost of 8 dams that then block the salmon in their migration route up that amazing river from the ocean. 4 dams on the lower Snake, 4 on the lower Columbia. Once 16 million fish, one of the most plentiful runs of salmon in the world, reduced to an endangered species. The Save Our Wild Salmon Coalition, Idaho Rivers United, is a part of that, a leading part of it, and other groups are working to try to get rid of 4 of those lower 4 Snake River dams, which only provide 4% of the Northwest power. We could get the power by alternative means very easily and restore those amazing runs of salmon if we just can muster the political will to do that. Anyway, we saw all of that on that trip as I took pictures. And here's the other great trip, the Green River of Colorado and Utah, where Ann and I launched a 400-mile trip. Here's Ann and her kayak. I rode the raft with our gear here through these wonderful rapids. And on down here to Split Mountain here in Dinosaur National Monument, where we scrambled up the ridgeline here to look at the river down below as it cut through that desert landscape, and then on to flat water, gentle flowing waters below those canyons. Here as we go through the desert of Utah, and it just wasn't fair. We're in the middle here of a very harsh desert, but we had the worst mosquitoes of our life. Because the river there would overflow in its floodplains, as it should do, and tremendous numbers of mosquitoes hatching out as the waters then receded. We actually boated with mosquito nets on our heads some days. But then into Desolation Canyon here, which was wonderful, easy sailing again, with great rapid country, like a miniature Grand Canyon. Till we came to the confluence with the Colorado River, much bigger flow here, and Ann and I actually got out of the raft and swam from the Green River into the Colorado just for the feel of it. And then we joined that greater flow on down through the big whitewater of Cataract Canyon until we emerged then finally into the flat water of Powell Reservoir down below at the end of our trip. And so I love to take pictures on trips like that, but then when the great publisher Harry Abrams agreed to do my photo book about rivers all over the country and threatened rivers, I launched a whole new quest to go out and get the most beautiful photos I could of rivers all over America. Here from the desert canyons of Utah to the moist, green Appalachian waters here in the New River in West Virginia. And so what I'd like to do here with the rest of my time with you is just show you some of the highlights of that nationwide tour of rivers. And Seth, I forgot to ask, okay, I guess, I was thinking we had more lights on here than we do, but we're okay. Excuse me, I was confused for a minute. This is the beginning here in the New England states, the northeastern part of our country, the Housatonic River at sunrise here. One of the great streams left in the northeast. The Niagara River, we don't think of it really as a river much, we just think of it as a waterfall. But of course that waterfall is a river here of tremendous power and force as it flows down. The Ausable River in the Adirondacks Mountains of New York. I was out photographing that stream here as this autumn storm built overhead, and then suddenly those clouds parted, and there was a little beam of sunlight that hit those red maple forests in the background. Suddenly I had to cover for my book. Here's the Delaware River of Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey.